Okay, so I slept really, really bad, and so my neck here hurts so fucking much. So if I'm ever like tilted a little too much and you're like, what's happening? That's what's happening. So just bear with me. You're like, what kind of intro is this? This is just selfish propaganda of being selfish. Yes, that is quite the point. You're like, what's happening with her? I am romanticizing selfishness, and that is not what the romantic era is, but it is what someone can misconstrue the romantic era for if they construe it wrongly. So, isn't that a fun intro? If you can make it artsy, people will love it, even if it's selfish. Okay, let's actually get into it. We are so past the romantic era, so past, like, historically, yes, but we're also like mentally so past it. And we have traded materialism and realism and kind of just like thought that would do something. Has it done anything except made everyone miserable? I'm not I'm not saying things aren't fun. Things are fun, they're just not fulfilling. Things are fun, they're just not fulfilling. You don't build a life on things. You don't. And if you do, you see how people live on things. There's a reason you can't outsource connection. There's a reason people are sadder than they've ever been. They're more disconnected than they've ever been. There's phones everywhere. People can't even stand in line without grabbing their phone and needing to be distracted from their own mind, or making eye contact at one stranger because they might film it as a TikTok and then say they were harassing them because they dare lay eyes on a stranger for 2 seconds too long. We have just become so disconnected, so obviously we're miserable and depressed. And you're like, I think poets are too, for different reasons, okay? Our sadness has a good return on investment, and our sadness is built on happiness. Our sadness is built on happiness. Our loneliness is built on connection that has fleeted, whereas some people's loneliness is built on something they've never had. Okay, so let's get into the romantic era. If you feel connected to anything I've said, you should definitely stick around. So, this was an era in history. Am I saying everything was great during that era? No. But there's also no historical era ever where you're like, I just love everything about it. There's even people who I'm going to talk about as an example who I don't love everything about them. But we need romance, I'm sorry, we do. And it's not just romantic romance, which sounds funny that I'm saying it like that, but the romantic era is so many things. So, I took notes, let's get into them. So many things. So let's start with the basics of the morals of the romantic era. But before we do, go check out my poetry book, my fiction book, and my second poetry book. It's all linked below, as well as my journal and my guided journal. I definitely think those will be helpful in your romantic era, but I'll get more into that as well as we go. So, first of all, you're like, how can I enter into my romantic era if I don't feel like it and if blah, blah, blah. Like, you'll have all of these excuses and I can't even come up with all of them, but you'll have them. I'll give you one fact. During the romantic era was not called the romantic era. What the romantic era was a movement against the age of the Enlightenment's emphasis on the Industrial Revolution. The Romantic era was what? A movement against. It was not a movement for, it was a movement against. And I do think in this it's funny. When was it? Industrial Revolution. I feel like we had another one with phones and internet and TikTok. It's not an industrial revolution, but it is an internet-tian revolution of just so much internet and so much pretended connection. I digress, but I actually don't. So that is what your romantic era can be. You don't need to wait for history to catch up. Your romantic era, your entering into your romantic era, can just be the simple movement against phones, movement against what you've done before, how you've treated people before, how you thought about life before. It can be rebellious. Romance can be a rebellion against what you've done before. It does not have to be this like airy-fairy, wee-hee-hee-hee-hee. And there almost is something rebellious about also the airy-fairy, about also the childishness, about being a child as an adult. Not in a weird way, okay? I'm not excusing some weirdos. No. But the openness to still learn, to still try. What is more rebellious than a 50-year-old going to university? That's random, right? What is more rebellious than someone who's done and succeeded in doing something completely new now and completely new to career, or trying again? What is more rebellious than someone who's fallen down 10,000 times and gets back up and pretends as if they've never fallen down? Not because they haven't learned, but because they go for it again, like a child would, like a child that is learning to walk would. What is more rebellious than that? What is more rebellious than trying and looking like a fool in the service of who you actually want to be? And you're like, a lot of things, like, I don't know, stealing, crime. I have a poem about this. It's called The Mindless Rebel. And that there is, in my second book, there is this idea of rebellion being for no cause. That's just being stupid. I explain that much better in the poem, obviously, but we don't need more mindless rebels, okay? We don't need more mindless people. We need more minds, okay? Not less of them. So let's get into it. So that is how you can define the era, because when you start an era, you usually need like not a villain origin story, but an origin story. If someone would ask you, hey, you seem different, what happened? You could be like, well, I got so sick of fill in the blank, and this is my active trying, rebelling against this thing that I'm so sick of. This is like medicine for a broken heart. This is like da-da-da with this. You can use the metaphor, you can dress it up, you can dress it down the same way you wouldn't wear the same thing to church as you would to a club. You can say different things to different people and still be in the same body of mind. Alright, so that is how eras are defined in people, in life, in history. Now we look back, and historians then called it the Romantic era, but that was not its purpose. That was not its defining factor. That was not how it started. Okay, let's go into it. The morals of it, or the values of it. Individualism, the integrity and inner experience and personal feelings of the individual. This might be the downfall of the Romantic era when it is taken too far. Emotion over reason. Emotion over reason. Just feelings and no logic. Because the internet, oh my god, I wish someone could do that, and if you do, please do it on TikTok and tag me in it, which is just a clip of like 10 minutes of everyone being like, we don't care about your feelings, it's just about the facts. We don't care about your feelings, it's just about the facts. And I'm like, thanks, that sounds so appealing. Thanks, I'll listen to that. And there's a time and place for facts, but humans are not fact-based creatures. What? I mean, sure, if there's a tiger there, run away, but we're not like these like factual beings in our entirety at all. We outsource facts. We read facts, we listen to facts, we inform ourselves about facts, we try to mix facts into our life, but we're not factual beings, we're emotional beings. The emotion is within us, the facts are around us. So I always hate it when people say that, and I'm like, okay, thanks. I'm sure AI is not going to get rid of you, you factual maniac. Nature and the supernatural. Nature was seen as the idealized source of spiritual truth, spirituality. So you might, in your Romantic era, want to get into something. Whatever you want to get into. You can get into energy, you can get into meditation, you can get into a religion, you can get into a belief system, you can get into just a philosophy of life. But you do need an anchor. Why? Because emotion over reason. But you need something to wheel those emotions. Does that make sense? I think it does. And that's why eras in history are usually well structured, if they've produced really cool people out of it, is you'll have the emotionality, but then you'll have the spirituality. If you don't have that, you have mayhem. All right. A way to connect with the divine, the movement also had a fascination with the supernatural mystics beyond the natural world. Imagination. Imagination was considered a powerful tool for accessing deeper truths and transcending everyday reality, giving artistic prophetic role and interprets of reality. This is interesting because imagination predates facts. There are so many things, and it's insane. It drives me insane that this exists. There's so many things in history books that you read before in fiction. And then there's so many things in history books that you read and that they're now. There's so much repetition in the mind and in life and in beforehand. Also, religion, so crazy. The things that religion will say, 2,000 years later, science will be able to back it up. Like almost all religions talk about how important the mind is and what you think is. And now we have actual brain scans and actual ways to measure this and blah, blah, blah. So it is interesting that imagination precedes facts. Does that mean everything you imagine will become a fact in 2,000 years? No. But also you'll be dead by then. So you might as well have some fun until then. Freedom and non-conformity. A key moral imperative was to challenge social conventions and political norms, advocating for personal freedom and independence. And I think it's also interesting to note the time in history it took place, because I think we have taken individualism too far. But at that time, it was a counter movement to something else, and also historically within that context, they needed it. It's the advice paradox that I've touched on in podcasts before, is the middle path is usually the goal, but people are not at the middle path, and the people who are don't need advice. And so people will either tell you to go more left or more right because they're assuming you're somewhere. Does that make sense? Like people tell you to text less when you text too much, people tell you to text more when you text too little. But obviously the goal is not to never text or only text, the goal is to be here. And that's, these counter movements is like history and people's attempt of getting there. And obviously you swing a little too much, but you are swinging and you are moving, and that is movement and that is history. I don't know that much about history, but that was a good line, so let's pretend that was. Idealization of the past. Romantics often look back to a received golden age in the past, like the medieval era, as a nobler, purer time compared to their industrial, increasing, rational society. Okay, so you're like, let's talk. So how would you do that? The 90s. I think the 90s is so fascinating. 80s and 90s I think are really fascinating. They had Queen, they had all the things we have now, except all the things we don't want to have now. Does that make sense? They had clubs, not that clubs is like the universal thing. They had phones, they had computers, but they didn't have this like addiction to it yet. And they had almost everything we have now, but to a lower degree, which was better. And they had more of what we don't have now, which is connection, talking to people, so on and so forth. And not this fear of strangers and phones. I cannot have one more fucking phone in a workout class. Why am I being filmed? Do you, like, really? And I hate it. Like, I want to actively be blurred out. I am not working out here to be filmed, whatever. But that's what I'm saying. If you were filmed at a workout class in the 90s, it's because you were the instructor and you were filming for like a video cassette. Like, not video cassette, but a CD or something. So how do you romanticize? You have to pick. You don't have to pick the 90s. That would just be my example. I think the 90s are fascinating. I'm also black, so I'm not like, you know what? Thousands of years ago. I'm just looking forward for that one. Like, but for you, it might be that time. For you, it might be the 1950s because you find it appealing. And this is the thing I'm granting you. I'm granting you not absolutism, but specifics. I said I like most of the things in the Romantic era, and we're going to go into more of the things I like, but individualism has gone too far. But I'm assuming, and I'm romanticizing, that in that era it is not. Just because you say 1950s, unless you mean something else, doesn't mean you're like everything in the entirety of the 1950s. I think you can even pick and choose. Like, I want to be in love in the 1950s, and I want to listen to music in the 1990s, and I want to watch a movie in the 2000s, and you're like, how do I do that? The only good part of a phone is you basically have a time machine. You can listen to music from whatever era you want to listen to. You can read philosophers from any era. You can listen to music. You can watch movies from that time. Like, you could create a new era of romantic. You can make the postmodern romanticism your era. I don't know if that's an actual era, but you can make that. So you can take bits and pieces. And then you can take it on, as in is now. You're not just only thinking of it, you're also like doing it, experiencing it. Rollerblading parks. Like, it can be ridiculous things. That's how I would do it. Okay, let's get back into it. So, the Romantic era was an artistic, literary, and intellectual movement that originated in Europe around the late 18th century and flourished until the mid-19th century. It was a reaction against the Enlightenment's emphasis on reasoning, championing instead of imagination, emotion, individualism, and the power and beauty of nature. They repeated again and again. It was a counter movement. Most of things are counter movements, not just movement form. And they still get to be magical. The reason why you do something is very unimportant unless it is important. Does that make sense? Like, there's not you just have to be in love with life, and that's why. You can just be so sick of not being in love with life that you're like, fuck it, I'm gonna be in love with life. Like, let's figure this out. Even if it means I'm heartbroken half of the time, even if that means tears become my primary source of hydration or whatever. You can just be so sick of something to get out of it. That's also a way to step into a new era. It doesn't have to be this like, and then she entered into a new era, and then like have sparkles around. Okay, the key themes include intense emotion, the sublime awe and inspiring grandeur, individualism, nationalism, see? Not everything has to be copied, and supernatural elements. Characteristics, emphasis on emotion, imagination. Romantics sought to break from rationalism and enlightenment by valuing emotional sensitivity and the power of the individual imagination. I think we had a very short time where we valued emotions, but that quickly veered into victim narratives, and it was not romantic. It was sad. And there's something interesting. I've written a poem about this, I think in my first book, which was falling down on purpose is not the same as walking somewhere and falling down. And it's the same with heartbreak. Breaking your heart on purpose or trying to fall in love is a very different feeling than just falling in love. You can't really fake it. And when you do fall on purpose, it feels different and oddly enough worse. Appreciation of nature. You don't have to be an environmental like maniac, but I do think like just small things. You could maybe help at the beach, help somewhere once a month, once a year, just do something for nature. Even if that's just picking up one piece of trash that's on the floor and putting it in the trash can when you're walking. Falling in love with trees. I love trees and I love owls. Maybe have a spirit animal. Have an animal that like represents who you are. I definitely think owls do for me. I just do. And birds in general are very much my cup of tea. And having something outside of yourself that connects you to nature. Sit under a tree. I got kicked out of a tree once. So I was at a tree, meditating. And it was like the perfect tree because it was the shape of a chair. It was the perfect tree. And they kicked me out. Like, apparently you're not allowed to sit on that tree. I tell you. But find a thing in nature. Butterflies, flowers, roses, rose petals. It can even be like a bubble bath that ends up with rose petals around. Like, it can be anything. It doesn't have to be like you turn into a tree person and you climb and you make a house with a tree and you do these crazy things. It doesn't have to be any of that. It just has to be something that is true and authentic and fun for you. If it can just be sunlight, it can just be tanning, it can just be like a little thing, a really little thing. Or I don't know, you walk and you see an ant, and instead of stepping on the ant, you move your leg and you try to avoid every ant you see. Now, don't drive yourself insane, but it can be something small. That is the beauty of romance and love, is it is big in its emotion, but it doesn't have to be big in anything else. It's magical. It has a magical element to it because it's not explainable. Me and all the other poets have been trying to explain it for like 2,000 plus years, and we're still like, okay, let's try again. And it's larger than life, but it is also completely based in life. It's like the sky and the floor all in one. It's like heaven and earth and everything at once, but also so refined. It is so weird. So, there was a deep reverence for nature, often seen as a spiritual source and an emotional truth, which became a common theme in the literature and art. And the self, individualism, self-realization, self-expression, self. There was a lot of selves. Now let's get into the fancy people. And this is maybe a good tip to keep in mind for when you are going to enter your romantic era, is try not to become insane and selfish. Try not. And I'll give you a really good definition of selfish, because I think some definitions of selfish are like very vague. I once saw one definition of selfish and I never saw it again, and I don't know where I found it because I looked it up again and I don't think it was Oxford. I just couldn't find it again. But the definition I remember seeing once was selfish is when one only thinks of oneself. And you're like, okay, well, the focus is on only. Underline, highlight, red, capital letters, only. It is not number one. It's not that you think of yourself first. It is that you only think of yourself. Try not to do that. It's boring. It's the root of like a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress. And oddly enough, I don't think poets are especially anxious, where almost everything else bad. It's not true. I don't know. You know what? I have no idea. Someone else should report. But I think because they are a little bit others focused, even if it's just being in love and their perception of the other person, it is still the other person to a certain degree. Now let's talk about the superstars of the Romantic era. Lord Byron. So what can we learn from him? Don't do anything he's done in his love life. Do not, okay? Except maybe the person he married, because she invented Byromania, which is basically the first like prototype of Beatlemania, and the idea that people become, I think especially women, but maybe even people, I don't know, we become so infatuated and so in love with someone they don't really know, and his wife came up with that, and that was very cute. That is a very cute word to come up with for someone you're married to. So that is nice. But everything else in his personal life is a little bit of a wreck and is a little bit all over the place. He gets away with it, but I would not recommend. But so I'll give you a picture. I think it's a painting, yeah. But I'm a visual person, and if I have a picture to a face, it is much easier. So this is Lord Byron. It's quite a dark picture now, let's see it. But I didn't paint it, okay? So this is what you get. So that's Lord Byron. So you have a picture in mind. What does he do well? He falls in love with his flaws. He pathologizes, but in a good way, his flaws. Now, his flaws are not like random weird things, but they are. But he doesn't make them seem as such. One of his flaws was his foot. Like, he had something with his foot. But then he kind of romanticized that. And he, from what I've heard, and I've not read much of his poems. I think I just read one now because I was listening to a podcast about him. He romanticizes pain. He has a romance with pain. He's almost in a relationship with pain. Most poets, I think, have a tendency to do that. Whether that's a particularly healthy relationship, I don't know. I've seen unhealthier ones, huh? But he is in love with his pain a little bit. You can obviously take this too far, but I do think it's better to be in love with pain than to avoid pain, because at large, most people, if they're in love with pain, they still don't seek it out. Like, I mean, that can happen, but I think it is so rare that it's almost a no man's problem. So that's one thing he does really well. Now, he is described as a rake, which is a dissolute or immoral person. A dissolute or immoral person, especially a man who indulges in vices or lacks sexual restraint. So, don't copy all of his personality. Definitely don't. I'm not saying, like, woohoo, you should do everything he says. But he does romanticize his pain. Now, does he probably romanticize his vices as well? Yeah. And that's definitely not good. But no, that's not good. No, it's not good. But it makes sense for the time era he's in. That's why you might want to call your romantic era something else except just romantic era. You might want to call it, I don't know, post-romance era, modern romance era, postmodern romance era, something like that. You might want to rebrand it and really, you could even take pictures, like you could take this to the max. You could make a vision board of Greece and Rome and have Lord Byron in the corner and da-da-da, and just have this like vision board of your romantic era. Okay, so that's that. Then let's talk about the musician, Beethoven. Did you hear the drama he had with his songs? So the Para Elisa is for Elisa, which I learned in Spanish. Not to play it in Spanish, but I had the title in Spanish, so that's why I said it in Spanish. Whatever, you didn't care, but now you know. His drama was that he wrote that for Elisa, and then Elisa married somebody else, and so the next thing he composed was a really difficult piece, because he was like, you're not going to play any of my pieces anymore, honey. So that was like his personal drama. I also think he went deaf, right? That was the one who couldn't hear at the end, which is insane. But that's his shtick. I also think, yeah, so it is emotional. That is an emotional thing to do, but isn't all music kind of emotional to begin with? Now, let's talk about what you are reacting to, because we earlier said you are reacting to something. Eras are a reaction, usually. They're not an action, they're a reaction, usually. There's a reason you need a new era. If the old era would have worked perfectly, it would have just continued on. So, you are reacting to materialism and realism versus idealism. So you're maybe more in the idealistic than the realistic and materialistic. I think people have conflated realism and materialism a lot, and they've been like, be realistic, and they're just talking about material things, and there's this like there really is an illusion and a delusion of people who are like, that's not logical, that's not factual. And it's like, yeah, my dude, it's not. Are you a factual being? Does your memory function that way? No. Does your mind function that way? No. Do your hormones function that way? No. You're an emotional being with hormones, with reactions, with feelings. Yes, facts are great. They're wonderful, and thank God for them, because otherwise there would be no poet ever alive. No, I'm joking. Well, but you're not a factual, rational being. There's a reason you need to outsource that. There's a reason you need to read that. There's a reason you need to seek that out, because it's not within you. And that is fine. That's what makes you human. I think it's ridiculous when people like, the emotional side. You mean the human side? You mean all of the humans? You think your arguments are not based on your emotions? You think you're not Googling things based on how you feel? No. You have no feelings. No. You're the robots? We already have AI, and robots are probably on their way to us as we speak. You really think you need to now add to the robot apocalypse? Like, what? So that can be your reaction. Not that exact thing, but that's can be what you're reacting to. I think it's also just idealism and positivity and falling in love with life and trying and ridiculous things like beautiful notebook. Like you can have props. So you can have the vision board and then you can have props. Ink. Beautiful old notebooks. Candles. Scented candles. Random little like things that set you into the mood of that era. You can have a new wardrobe, maybe dark academia, maybe weird oversized, I don't know what. You can pick a new era. You can really enter a new era the same way they did then. There was new inventions, there was new things, there was new people. There can be new inventions, new things, new people in your life. New inventions, new things you take in, new hobbies, new interests, new whatever. And this is not about like, tomorrow you shall be a new person. Just change everything around and do it while a handstand is what you're positioning yourself as. No. But there is something really beautiful about getting to romance life and falling in love with life and the childishness of trying. The childishness of trying. And there is no life when one is not sad. So you better make sure you're happy in between the sadnesses. There is no life where one is never scared, where one is never any of the negative emotions. That just doesn't exist. So you better make sure that in between those emotions, you're having a blast. Because no matter how much you try to temper the highs, the lows don't get any shorter. They don't. There is no way to be so balanced that you're never sad. There is no way to be so smart that you never make a mistake. There is no way to avoid the bad. So you might as well really enjoy the good. And if you can't be sad, you can't be happy. And if you can't be happy, you can't be sad. Because if you can't be one, then the other one is stressful. If you cannot be sad, happiness becomes so stressful. Because it becomes this thing of like, well, but what if it leaves? What if it leaves? What if it leaves? And you're like, how did the romantics do it then? Poets, songwriters. There's a reason that thrived in that time, and that you had Beethoven and Byron and these people at that time, because emotions and being human and really loving takes a lot, but it gives a lot, and it colors the world you see. And no matter how good a black and white movie is, it's just not a movie with color. No matter how good life is without romantics, whatever sense that is, it doesn't have to be romance, like in the dating. It can just be looking at a tree for way too long. It can be buying a flip phone and being off the grid for 2 days. It can be listening to a stranger's story. It can be asking that one weird question to the stranger you just met because you're like, I hate small talk. Tell me about what way you'd like to die. Like just random, really weird, odd questions. It can be that. It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be grand. It just has to be. It just has to be. It just has to exist. And I'll leave you with one of the philosophers of that time that I don't fucking understand. Because I read it 10 times and I don't understand it. So if you understand it, please leave it in the comments. The self must already have some prior acquaintance with itself, independent of the act of reflection. No object comes to consciousness except under the condition that I am aware of myself, the conscious subject. So consciousness must be separate from the self, is I think what he's saying. But I still don't get it. It's from Fichte. Heinrich Fichte's original site, inside. So, I'll give you also a picture of him. But I did not get that. Do you see him? Yeah, that's him. I did not get that. If you did, please let me know in the comments. If you're gonna start your romantic era, please let me know. If you're gonna do the vision board or any of the things I've just listed in this video, please tag me on TikTok. I would love to see that. And we're gonna end this on a big hooray of love letters. Love letters. This is posted on the last Sunday of December. Before December, sorry. And love letters has been something I've done in January and in August, because that was my birthday, and we're doing it again in December on TikTok. Every day we're doing a love letter, and you can look back at the old ones. I have a video on here, I think it's an hour long, about love letters as well, just a compilation. But I'm really excited, and I hope you join in, and you can write a love letter to anyone. You can write a love letter to someone you love platonically. You can write a love letter to yourself. You can write a love letter to your future husband, future wife. If you don't have somebody yet, you can write a love letter to yourself, and you can write a love letter to humanity. You can write a love letter to your career. You can write a love letter to a tree you see. You can write a love letter to your spirit animal. You can write a love letter to whatever. You can fall in love with whatever. It doesn't have to be this one way to fall in love, one way to look at something. You can fall in love with anything, and therefore you can write a love letter about anything. So go check that out. I'm really excited. Go follow me on there and check out all my poetry books and fiction book. It's sprinkled in with a lot of love and a lot of questions about love in all of the books in different ways and different fashions. And yeah. And if you're a guy and you want to write a love letter for a girl and you're not sure if you should, ask her what her love language is. If one of her love languages, if like top 2, one of them is words of affirmation, go look at the tutorials, because she will love that. And I think I might even offer writing love letters for people on TikTok or on Instagram at some point. So follow me on all of the places. Thanks, and I'm really excited for you to enter this new beautiful era.